The Scooby Doo franchise is a generational fan favorite. With characters that have stood the test of time, Scooby Doo remains to be loved by multiple generations of fans. As someone who's barely seen any of the original Scooby Doo films, the one constant in my childhood was rewatching Matthew Lillard's performance from the original and having the time of my life. However, as Halloween approaches, I want to dive into the whole series of films to see how good they really are. As I mentioned, I haven't seen most of these films before, so I thought it would be fun to sit back and look at a franchise and see whether nostalgia is making these movies better than they are, or if they're actually good. With that being said though, I'll be breaking down these films into 4 categories, based on rigorous and objective criteria. With that being story, characters, how good was the twist, because Scooby-Doo is known for that, and lastly, how was the comedy? Because if I'm not laughing, something went wrong. Each of these categories will be worth 10 points, totaling 40 points. This will determine where they fall on the tier list, so we can determine which film is the best of the bunch. So with that in mind, let's dive into Mystery Inc. and get caught up with Scooby Doo.
What's a Scooby-Doo? We're coming after you. You're gonna solve that mystery.
Do you guys like my shirt? I got it just for you guys.
You need to leave!
This movie is pure fun. Of all these movies, the original 2 are the only films I even have a remote remembrance of. The flashbacks to my childhood with these particular films are insane. Getting to witness these characters in live action still holds up quite well in my opinion. With a crew like these guys too, their chemistry with one another is off the charts. The original Scooby-Doo follows the gang after a 2-year hiatus where a mysterious benefactor reunites them on a spooky island. There, they must figure out a mysterious spell that's causing all of the inhabitants of the island to start acting weird. Going into this ranking, I knew specifically that none of these movies were going to transcend my perception of space-time or make me look introspectively at myself to learn about some hidden meaning of life, okay? So when I rank these movies based off of story, it's simply a meter on how fun I had with it and if the movie understands its simplicity and uses it to make it entertaining instead of cringe. And this movie is damn sure entertaining. There are a lot of moments where I found myself having a great time with this movie. I think it helped that this took place on an island, so a lot of the set pieces here help draw you into the environment more. Having the crew go to different spots on the island to sort out the mystery led to a lot of fun sequences. To note, the first time they enter the castle where Fred and Velma find the hidden room, or when Shaggy and Scooby use ATVs to escape the possessed Fred. The gang's mystery has a lot of moments where the movie can have fun and let the characters be themselves. Shaggy, who's portrayed perfectly by Matthew Lillard, and Scooby can be seen hotboxing their car, but not with weed, by making burgers, or when they have a farting competition.
Are you kidding?
Shaggy remains the lovable, relaxed, and easily frightened goofball of the group, along with Scooby, who both love food. Fred is the himbo leader we know and love, but grows to let others share the spotlight. Velma is the smart one still, but finally gets a chance to be seen. And Daphne goes from being a useless damsel to Kill Bill by the end of the film. Not only was this entertaining, but it remains true to how the characters are in the show, and I like that a lot. And man, was this movie funny. Again, the humor I possess can be qualified as that of a child, but I feel like there are a lot of moments for adults to be had in this film too. In a fantastic turn of events, this movie's humor was more so charming to me than cringe. Yes, some jokes don't hold up as well 22 years later, but given the fact I'm watching a children's movie with a talking dog, its humor is more progressive for its time. With Scooby-Doo, it's known for its grandiose reveals. Those that prove the ghouls and goose they catch are merely human, but this movie flips that. Instead of a human trying to get power, it's Scrappy Doo, the bastard nephew of Scooby-Doo, wants to be recognized as the true villain for the gang. And I mean, it's fine. I found it more interesting than if they just kept the Mr. Bean guy as the main villain. So I guess it gets points for that. Overall though, this movie was a ton of fun. And I know why there's a lot of love for it from people my age or older. With that being said, I thought the story was a 7, the characters a 9, the humor a 9, and the twist a 6, bringing the original movie score to a 31, putting it in A tier. Also, since these movies love to have Velma transformation sequences, let's have a little fun and make a side tier list for it. Why don't we? This movie has a great Velma transformation sequence that is definitely A tier worthy. These movies knew what they were doing with these scenes, man. But it's not the end of this particular group of mystery hunters, since they come back for For a sequel that doesn't pay much attention to the first one, this movie does a great job of expanding the emotional feelings of the characters, which I can't believe I'm saying about a Scooby Doo film, but here we are. This film follows the gang after they open a new museum in Coolsville that shows all of the costumes they've collected of bad guys over the years. However, amid the museum's opening weekend, it gets attacked by a new evil bad guy called the Pterodactyl Ghost. In this new mystery, the team needs to track down who this may be and stop them before they try and destroy Coolsville forever. Again, this film has a story that is just really fun for audiences and myself. As I mentioned before, this movie progresses the emotional sides of these characters quite well. The main plot is very much in standard gear here, with all the ghoulish action, fart jokes and such, but the extent the movie goes to make the gang feel more human is pretty heartwarming. For instance, a major plot point in this film is how Shaggy and Scooby feel useless to the rest of the gang, and that every time they try and do something, it ends up going wrong, so they think less of themselves because of it. This leads to a great conclusion for them, where the most important artifact to stop the bad guy is entrusted to them by Velma, the smartest of the group, because she knows there's more to them than failure. And they do succeed in the end together, which was great. Velma has a character journey here too, where the first one was about being seen and her wanting to be appreciated for her work publicly. This film uses it to show Velma's growth in her self-esteem. She thinks her interests aren't lovable, or that she's too logical for anyone to love her. So she transforms herself in the hopes to win over Seth Green's character by not being her true self. But by the end of the flick, she learns that being her true self is the most important part of finding a true relationship. And it works out, as Seth Green likes her for her. Even Fred grows in this film. For a himbo, he doesn't stress about situations or show fear, as he thinks that makes him a wimp or a loser. Yet by the end of the film, he admits how scared he is of the situation, and learns admitting fear isn't being a wimp, but simply being human. For a children's movie, and I mean, don't mistake me, this movie is childish. These underlying tones of human and adult themes, though, are pretty wild, and for 2004, this was pretty ahead of its time for certain thematics, especially the whole not being afraid thing. Again, for all these characters' growth, you still know them as their lovable cartoon counterparts. Scooby and Shaggy are fun and loose, Fred is that male leader himbo, Daphne has her girly moments, and Velma is still the smart one. But again, the added layers this film goes to make them feel more than a lifeless caricature is really well done. The movie still retains its humorous charm, but if you don't find the first one funny, you're probably not going to enjoy this one for its humor either. And since I've already established I think fart jokes can be funny, well, this was up my alley. I do think the first one is a bit funnier though, especially with its hidden, more adult jokes.
I'm Mary Jane.
Like, that is my favorite name.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
In terms of the villains this time around, I enjoyed them a lot. The Pterodactyl Ghost has some great sequences with its ghouls, utilizing practical effects and CGI creatures for some great action moments. Where the first movie's CGI is quite dated, this movie's CGI is quite good in comparison. The twist of the villain being the reporter girl, but then being Dr. Jacobo, surprised me. I'm being for real. It was quite good. Or I'm just stupid. That could be it too. With that being said, this movie scores a 9 out of 10 on story, 10 out of 10 on the characters, the humor an 8, and the twist being an 8, putting this movie score at a 35, putting this in S tier. And continuing on our Velma transformation tier list, we have this at S tier. And a quick little side tangent, this scene alone, along with the Megan Fox scene in Transformers, is how I knew I liked women. Like, objectively, this is a top 10 transformation moment of all time. God damn. Now, this movie franchise never had a proper conclusion, so no third movie was ever made. Apparently, WB thought this movie didn't earn them enough money to make a third one, so they just decided to scrap this entire franchise altogether, which I think was a dumb decision. But since the sequel, it took 16 years for them to make a new theatrical Scooby Doo release. But in the middle of these films were 3 live-action, direct-to-DVD television movies with a whole new crew. And it's time I dive into them. I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised, more so praying, because I love Robbie and Amell, but why they have a black-haired Fred makes no sense to me. It's like seeing a blonde-haired Peter Parker. It feels like I'm in a different dimension. But with that being said, I guess it's time we dive into Look, this movie was made for Cartoon Network. Its budget was very minuscule in comparison to the original WB produced films, so it's gonna get cut some slack for CGI work and action in that sense. For all intents and purposes though, I don't hate this movie. Usually when you look back at old children's movies from Disney Channel or Cartoon Network, you realize just how cringe they are, and there are a lot of cringe moments in this film, but it's kind of heartwarming in a sense. Other films from this era can be pretty bad, but this one isn't horrible. It's like right in the middle of being pure cringe and decent. This movie is the origin of all the Scooby characters, how they became introduced to one another, how the crew started, how certain catchphrases began, and so on. For a movie centered around their time in high school, I thought it was pretty fun. Although the whole reason for their mystery to begin with is quite ridiculous, which is that their vice principal expels them for indirectly causing their bus driver to drive onto school property. Yes, why the principal penalizes them instead of the literal bus driver is insane, but I digress. The rest of the film is low budget cheese that feels like a group of people celebrating Scooby Doo in a small budget form. The gang has some sweet moments between one another where you can see the cartoon coming to fruition through them. I thought that certain portrayals, while not holding a candle to the original gang, did a good enough job of recapturing the spirit of each of them. Shaggy's actor was quite good. Scooby Doo being voiced by Frank Welker was so cool, and Haley Kiyoko as Velma was great. In terms of story, this movie is quite goofy. I know that's what this whole film series is about, but when you get spoiled with fun action-oriented moments in the first two, it is only a matter of time before the cringe starts to set in, especially one that was made much lower budget on Cartoon Network. Some moments in here made me visually cringe because of the writing. Also, since this film takes the liberty to show these characters in high school, I feel like they did a good enough job at portraying how these characters would act as young kids. Fred being a football player just makes sense. Daphne being a preppy theater girl makes sense. The humor of this movie is hit or miss though. I find some stuff to land quite well, but some stuff has definitely aged horribly. What's crazy is this film also has a Velma transformation scene in it. That's like near one-to-one with that in the 2004 movie. Also, the villain twist I saw coming from a mile away. It being the principal was just easy to figure out for me, and I thought him terrorizing the school for a limited edition stamp for his collection is just what? In terms of story though, I'd give this movie a 6, the characters a 7, the humor a 6, and the villain twist a 5, putting this new gang for Mystery Inc. at a 24, putting it in C tier, with Velma's transformation going into B tier as well. But shockingly, this movie has a sequel, so let's keep going with
I'd do anything just to hold you in my arms.
Yo guys, we're on the road to 10K. If you like this video and you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button, please. All right, back to the video. I went into this one with little expectations for a television movie sequel. Most times, sequels can be worse on a kid's television station due to budgeting constraints and whatnot, but I thought this movie was pretty okay for the most part. This time around, the gang gets summer jobs, but while they're there, a mysterious ghost starts terrorizing the citizens of the resort that they're working at, so they must team up again to stop it. I thought the story of this movie was fine. Seeing the gang in a new setting led to some cool set pieces and brought some life to this film duology. The first one occurred in a high school, so it didn't feel that different or special. Here, the gang is located on an island, so there are moments when they're in caves, on beaches, and so on. I assume the budget was increased because the way this film is shot, too, is very good. The lighting looks better, and again, the ability to shoot on location for this island adventure adds to the immersion of it. The overall mystery, I thought, was pretty fun, and was the most entertaining part for me in this film. However, this film decided to do a fatal sin that plagues most of it, which is making the in-between moments during the mystery all about the relationships between Daphne and Fred, and a new budding crush Shaggy has on Velma? Yeah, shit's weird. There's just so much screen time presented for this that it takes away so much time on an already short movie. This film is only 80 minutes, and like 30 of it is just on this subplot alone. In a TV-style format, I think this would be something doable, since filler episodes could allow us time with the random idiosyncrasies of these characters. But when it's a 1 hour and 20-minute movie, you can't afford filler like this, especially random out-of-character moments like this with no payoff. Since Velma and Shaggy end up kissing and then immediately go like, let's just be friends. Like, what did I watch this for? I also found that the use of Scooby was lowered in this movie. I don't know if it was budgeting issues. Maybe they spent too much money on the locations and just said, screw Scooby, but he's barely here. The love subplot removes Scooby from most of the movie. Having these moments kind of makes the character seem a bit weird, especially for Shaggy, but their more critical character traits are still here, so they don't feel completely new or anything. In terms of humor, I laughed the least amount so far for all of these movies. I don't think that's a bad thing though, it's just this film wasn't nearly as jokey as the other ones. I'll take less jokey than cringe any day. And the villain being a ghost that possesses Velma was kind of interesting. I had a feeling it was coming, but I will say the practical effect of frog monsters looked incredible. Yeah, this movie isn't a horrible watch, and there are things about this one I found way more enjoyable than the first, but I think the first one had a better structure to it with its characters. So with that being said, I give this story a 6, the characters a 7, the humor a 5, and the villain a 6, putting this movie alongside its predecessor in C tier. Yeah, this was garbage. Come on. Are we really shocked here? Look, I have no problem with TV budgeted films, okay? If the other two on this list proved anything, is that I think it can be done pretty well if the creators have a love for the franchise, but like, who thought this was a good idea? Daphne and Velma is a 2018 straight-to-DVD film that decides to focus on the origins of Velma and Daphne before the whole Mystery Inc. gang becomes a thing later on. And like, why, though? The two most boring characters put together without Scooby Doo is kind of crazy. Like, am I wrong? Whoever thought it was a good idea to remove the best character in favor of these two deserves to be demoted. It's not even the fact that these characters suck. It's just how they're written and how bad the story is for this movie. The downfall of Velma and Daphne needs to be studied. I'm going to save you guys the incessant details of how bad this movie is from like a real harsh critic standpoint. Instead, I'll just say some stuff that happens in the movie and you can decide for yourself if you think this movie is worth watching or not. One of the first things that happens in this movie is that Daphne says she is very lucky, like Domino from Deadpool almost, but finds out that her dad was orchestrating everything in her life to that very moment to make it seem like she was lucky. Another thing is that Velma sits at home all day solving mysteries online, whatever that means, and when her only friend shows up in town, which is Daphne, she's just so mean the entire time. Like, so mean. I know Velma is known to be antisocial because of her logistical point of view, but like, that doesn't make her just be a bitch the entire time. Another thing, bringing it back to Daphne's dad, one of the major plot points of this movie is that there's this ghost following them throughout the entire film, but in reality it isn't any ghost, it's just Daphne's dad dressed up in a bathrobe riding a hoverboard. Cinema, baby. Yeah. And you know how Scooby Doo is known for their villains? Well, the villain in this one is insane. It is actually a mid-20s girl who uses a white model from Japan as the face of this multi-billion-dollar tech company where she uses the technology she creates to hypnotize young kids' minds to steal their creative passions from their brain to make more tech products. That is real. That is real. I'm not making that up. That is real. I didn't just use AI to make up a villain theory. That is actually what this movie is based on. The jokes are painfully unfunny, like swing and miss every time, and the villain just sucks. This whole film is easily the worst one on this list by far. I just can't fathom taking the two characters that are the most entertaining, especially the one whose name headlines the whole franchise, and just being like, you know what? I'm gonna do my own thing. Why? Why does this exist? This is the final score for it, and there's no Velma transformation in here either. So this movie should just be a 0, honestly. Well, this was refreshing. Getting an animated theatrical release of a Scooby Doo film was really nice for me. As much as I think live action has a charm to it, Scooby Doo is meant to be an animation. It just works so much better that way. Especially for Scooby as a character, it suits him perfectly because he does things that are just impossible to mimic in real life. Where Daphne and Velma decided to not focus on the greatest character in the franchise, this movie focuses directly on him. Other characters like the other Mystery Inc. members are there, but most of the spotlight is put on the relationship between Shaggy and Scooby, which I thought they did a good job on. The main plot revolves around Scooby and Shaggy being seen as less than compared to the other crew members, kind of like the second movie's plot. So when they leave, Scooby finds out he's an ancestor to this ancient dog that can open up a portal to ancient riches. So the villain character, named Dick Dastardly, crazy name for a villain by the way, tries to capture Scooby so he can get the riches for himself. Along the way, they run into new characters named Brian, who's the Blue Falcon, and his sidekick Dynamut. Goated characters, by the way. And they try to stop Dick together. Pause. Hey! Yeah, this story is really fun. With these new characters that bring a lot of fun to the tone of this movie, it made it very entertaining for me to watch, especially with how well the animation style did at capturing the action sequences in this film. This kind of story is perfect Scooby Doo for me, and I loved it. How the film focuses on the abnormal was cool, and I thought that it fit the vibe of Scooby Doo perfectly. Now, the characters in this movie are my favorite part of this film. Shaggy and Scooby have great chemistry here, and the focus on them adds a lot of funny moments to the film. Yet shockingly, these two made the movie for me. My God, do they have the greatest back and forth one-liners that had me dying.
Yeah, what kind of hero blames other people for his problems?
Meet Brian.
Blue Falcon and his crew added a lot of great moments between Shaggy and Scooby to the film too. The only thing I'll say is that because of the Shaggy and Scooby focus, characters like Velma, Fred, and Daphne get sidelined, so they feel pretty one-dimensional in retrospect, especially by the end of the film. The humor in this movie, for the most part, is hilarious. Again, anything with Blue Falcon and Dynamut is golden. Even moments from other characters like Shabby, Scoob, and Dick are great. There are a few cringe moments though, particularly from Velma, who writers seem to want to make her more annoying as the decades progress. Now, Dick Dastardly as a villain was pretty great. It's simple, but that's all I want. I thought that the relationship he had with his own dog to the comparison of Shaggy and Scooby was pretty touching. And knowing the villain from the beginning with no twist was quite unexpected. And I kind of preferred it, knowing that I was 6 movies deep into this franchise, so it subverted my expectations. Overall, I think this movie was great, and it's a shame it came out during the pandemic, so it got absolutely wrecked at the box office, with the planned sequel being made and not shown, because WB wanted to get that tax write-off, baby. Yeah, save money, let's go! It sucks knowing that this is the only product to be released in this style. In terms of a story, I'd give this movie an 8. The characters were a 7. Humor was an 8, and the villain was a 7 as well, giving this film a 30, putting it in A tier, along with the first Scooby-Doo. A fitting end to a pretty fun live-action journey. Also, this film's Velma design, fire. A tier design.
What's a Scooby Doo? We're coming after you. You're gonna solve that mystery.
After seeing the live-action movies, both theatrical and TV, to the start of an animated franchise that fizzled out, I think the Scooby-Doo movies are a ton of fun, besides this shit. In each installment, you could tell the creators had a ton of love for the original cartoons and wanted kids to enjoy newer versions of those lovable characters, and I could feel that appreciation on the screen. From casting the greatest actors and actresses for these roles in the originals, to having Frank Welker voice Scooby in the 2010 and 2020 films, it's evident that these production companies actually cared at one point to make a product that's worth watching, and make something that kids would recognize and care for. Even though some dialogue doesn't hold up, or why Fred's hair is black in the 2010s films, these films are great Halloween movies, and I'd recommend any of these to watch if you just want to watch something fun, or if you just have the time. Just don't watch this one ever. We're on the road to 10K subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. And guys, if you want to get access to these videos early, then please consider becoming a member for the channel, like my boys, Drop of Vanilla, Wub God, and Big Old Bear. Also, if you become a member, you get these shiny gold badges. Look at Vanilla's, dude, it's so shiny. Ooh, it's all golden and stuff. That could be you, guys, I'm telling you right now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you all in the next one. I hope you have a great Halloween, and you celebrate it with people you like, and you get a ton of candy. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out. I just want to say I recorded this whole thing and then found out I wasn't in focus the entire time, so I have to redo